Hello, welcome back to another video and welcome back to 3 months of wrap-ups in 3 days. And so today I'm going to talk to you about all of the books that I read in June. If you caught yesterday's video, I went through all the books I read in May, and tomorrow I will be covering all the books I read in July. I am aware that when these videos go up, it is going to be all September, and so August will be then also overdue, but that will have to come later in September. I'm not going to labour the point, we're just going to crack on because I want to share with you the amazing books that I read in June, and yeah, let's do it. I read 11 books in June and I DNF'd 1, but I had 2 5 stars, 2 4.5 stars, and so I have quite a lot of positive things to say about the books that were consumed. So, as always, we'll start at the bottom with my DNF and we'll work up from my least favourite to my most favourite. So the book that I DNF'd was Some Desperate Glory by Emily Tesh, which is a sci-fi space opera jobby that was nominated for the Arthur C. Clarke Award this year. And that was why I picked it up, because I was going to try and read the 6 shortlisted books, but alas, that has not happened. But this one was following this book. Charlie is in my office because I have no filming time, and so I'm trying to make do. So there will probably be quite a lot of edits in this, and if you hear him chirping in, that's what that is. So this one was about a young girl who was part of sort of a space academy. She was like top of her class, excellent fighter, militician, is that a word? You know what I'm trying to get at. But she was fab. Her brother was pretty much the only one above her. He got sent off to some suicide mission, and she was sent to like the nursery, basically to pop out the next generation of expert fighters. And she was obviously somewhat miffed about that. I thought this was a really interesting premise, but I was not in a great frame of mind when I started reading this, and it read quite average, and so I just wasn't in the mood for average and I DNF'd it. So I actually think this is probably a perfectly adequate book, but it just didn't really work for me at that time. Next up, we have a 2.5 star, and it is a classic. It's Frome by Edith Wharton, and I actually buddy read this with the fabulous Katia. I will leave Katia's channel below, and Katia was a very gracious buddy reader because I kind of just disappeared in the middle of it for personal reasons, and she was just a star. But unfortunately, the book wasn't as good as the buddy reader. This is a very short book. It's very desolate and atmospheric, I would say. And we follow a guy, Frome, and I can't really tell you too much about the plot because it is so short. But he's married, but his eye is maybe wandering to a girl that lives with them. And it's sort of about his inner thoughts. We're very much in his head. Apologies for the slamming doors. And yeah, it's one of those books where not a lot really happens. It's all about atmosphere. And the atmosphere was well done, but it just wasn't a Gemma book. It just wasn't. Not enough happened for it to be a me book. So that's why I only got 2.5 stars. Sad times. Then we move into 3-star territory, and we have Doppleganger by Naomi Klein. This was nominated for the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction, Longlist and Shortlist. Oh, it won, didn't it? It might have won. And I just thought this was really average, and I am a little bit perplexed really as to why this one won, because so many of the others I thought were outstanding, and then this one was just a bit, it was fine. So, okay, the book is called Doppleganger, and it's based on Naomi Klein's experience being mixed up on social media with Naomi Wolf, who has opposing political beliefs to her. And so she was obviously getting a bit peed off that her name was being dragged through the mud for something that someone else had said. And so it was about this sort of like digital Mirrorland. And that was quite interesting, but then she went into a lot of other areas of, like, I guess digital doubling to a degree, but a lot of the links were very tenuous to me, and it was just almost an excuse for Naomi Klein to just waffle on about all the things in the world that she has an issue with. And so the central theme didn't really pull it together, which is also the issue that I had with The Flat Place by Noreen Masood. I think Charlie even wants me to show you that. Who is this? Dave. Mega Minion Dave. There we go. And so, yeah, I just felt like the central theme didn't really put it together. It was just a launching off point for the author to go rogue. And so, yeah, it didn't work for me. I think there were much better books on that long list than this one. And I think it's been overhyped quite a lot. So, yeah, 3 stars. Then we move into 3.5 star territory, and we have Clear by Carys Davies. This book had potential to be on the book along list. It wasn't long listed, but a lot of people are loving this. Unfortunately, this is another one of those books that is just not a me book. It's set on a remote island, Scottish island, Irish island, and there's like one guy living there, and a guy comes over and is going to ask him to foxtrot Oscar. And it's about what happens when those two people meet and the relationship that they develop, and you know what it's like in being on this isolated island. And it's very beautiful writing and very mellow. It's quite a mellow book, but it was too mellow for me. Again, I needed more plot. It's not the kind of book I enjoy reading, but I could appreciate it for what it was, and there were some nice moments in it. In 8th position, we have Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. Again, 3.5 stars. And this is a book that everybody loves. It's set on Iceland, I believe. And we follow a woman who has been accused of murder and is sentenced to die. And in the time between her sentencing and the sentence being carried out, she is sent to a farm to live with a family while they sort of dot the I's and cross the T's. And then we follow various different people, but predominantly this girl and the priest who's sort of sent to, I guess, redeem her before her death. It was, again, a very atmospheric book. The setting was fantastic. The characters were interesting, but I just found that I couldn't really get into it. Oh, now I've got a phone call coming in. 1 minute. Okay, so, apologies. So, yeah, it just didn't really work for me. I thought it was fine, but I was expecting to be blown away, and I just wasn't, really. So, there we go. Then, in at number 7, we have The Sister Who Ate Her Brothers and Other Gruesome Tales by Jen Campbell, which is a children's short story collection where she takes fairy tales from around the world and tells them in a gruesome way, but in a way that's sort of gruesome but for children. And I read most of those to Charlie. Some of them I just read myself because he has a very short attention span. And yeah, we really enjoyed them. They were fantastic. The illustrations were fabulous, and yeah, I'd highly recommend if you have a child who likes the more gruesome things in life. Then I would recommend it. It was a really fun read. In at number 6, we have a graphic novel, Monstress by Marjorie Liu. So this was also 4 stars, and I really enjoyed this. But it was quite complicated. The world was quite complicated. So if anyone has read this series, I would love to know if it gets easier to understand as you go through. We're predominantly following a young girl who is part monster. She has like a monster arm. And cats are like quite important in this world. And for that reason, they're sort of despised by some and like idolised by others. And so some of the story is told by a cat that is helping our main character sort of along her journey. And we sort of get flashbacks of her past and like how she's come to be. But what I found quite difficult was the jumping in time. So it would jump back to different points in time at different points in the narrative, and I was a little bit like, oh, did that happen before that or did that happen after that? And yeah, so it's a bit jumpy, and then, like I say, the world itself was quite confusing. There's a lot of different species, and yeah, so it boggled my brain a little bit, but I did enjoy it while I was reading it, so yes. In at number 5, we have The House with the Golden Door by Elodie Harper, which is second in the Wolf Den trilogy. This is a historical fiction series set in Pompeii, ancient Pompeii, and we follow our main character, and in the first book she is a worker at a brothel, the Wolf Den, and we're sort of following her journey really. I can't tell you really anything about the second book because it would be massive spoilers for the first book. I did enjoy this. I did not enjoy it as much as The Wolf Den, and I feel like this one suffered a little bit from middle book syndrome. Kind of, it served a purpose to get us to a point in which I think we will then continue the story. But that said, I really enjoy Elodie Harper's writing, and I really enjoy the characters, and the sense of place in this is fantastic. You really feel like the grimy back streets of Pompeii, but you also feel like the decadence of like the upper classes and sort of like the gold leaf and the marble, and you get like a sense of like those two juxtaposing worlds, and she does that ever so well. And yeah, I'm really intrigued to get to the final book, which is the Temple of Fortuna. And also, for those that have read and enjoyed these books, Elodie Harper is coming with a new book next year. I believe it's called Boudica. So presumably about the historical figure Boudica, which I'm very excited about. I think that could be really good. And I think now that Elodie Harper's cut her teeth on this first trilogy, I think her writing will just continue to excel, and I'm really excited to follow her as an author. So yes. Then in 4th position, and we now move into 4.5 star territory, I have Nemesis Games, which is the 5th in the Expanse series that I am reading with Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot, Sarah from Fresh Hero Books, and Fraser Simons at Springboard Thoughts. And I've talked about this series quite a lot, but basically it's a space opera. There are 9 books in the series. Here is Jerry. We follow a crew, a central crew that is captained by a guy called Holden, and there is a proto-molecule that is let loose in the first book and is pretty nasty. And we sort of follow the evolution of that, but with the sort of, with that going on in the background, there's a lot of political turmoil between different factions, predominantly sort of Earth and Mars, and the Belt. And so that is really starting to ramp up now. And in Nemesis Games, we had perspectives of characters, all characters that we had met before, and that we knew quite well. And so that was just really, really fun. I kind of don't even want to tell you which POVs we got, because if you're reading them, you're going to be just so delighted when you get to book 5. But yes, I am reading the 6th book in September, so more to come to see if the series continues to be as awesome as it has been so far. But I would say these are just so much fun to read. They're not works of literary excellence, but they're just fun, and the plot is engaging, and you're sort of thrown into action at the beginning of every book, and your friends on the spaceship, the Rocinante, are definitely going to get into peril at some point, and that's the point where Sandy usually goes off on a tangent on our buddy reads. It's like, oh no, they're in danger, and then Sandy's like, yeah, I finished the book. So yeah, really enjoying those books and reading it with that group. It's really, really fun. In at number 3, we have another 4.5 star book, and that is Codependent by Madhumita Murgia. So the subtitle for this is Living in the Shadow of AI, and this is one of the books I was referring to when I talked about Doppleganger earlier. This book for me was so much better than Doppleganger, because it was all about AI. You knew what you were getting going in. The whole thing was talking about AI, the different forms of AI, and what I thought Murgia did really well was she kept this sort of thread of AI throughout the book, but she looked at negative and positive consequences. She very much presented it in a way that allowed the reader to think about what they thought. I didn't feel like she was leading an angle on this. I feel like she is still very much undecided as to whether she thinks AI is a good thing or a bad thing, or in fact that AI isn't a good thing or a bad thing. There are good things about it and there are bad things about it, and it's just about awareness of what those things are and how we use them and how we regulate them, which I thought was fantastic. It just seems like a really balanced book, and I learned a lot. I would highly recommend, if you are in any way linked to the digital world, which I think if you're watching YouTube you are, so everything about like your digital presence was talked about, and it was fascinating, terrifying in places, but fascinating. Highly recommend. Then in at number 2, and so the next 2 books were both 5 stars for me, so highly recommend. But we have Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, who is a South African broadcaster, DJ. I don't actually know Trevor Noah, like I haven't ever watched him do anything, but his book was super interesting. It's called Born a Crime because he was born to a black mother and a white father in South Africa, where that, at a time when that was illegal, shortly after apartheid, or no, shortly before apartheid ended. And Noah tells these stories of his childhood growing up in South Africa. He very much grew up with his mother and brother, and his dad was there but sort of in the background. And he tells these stories, and some of them are heartbreaking and some of them are hilarious. And it's a story of family as much as anything else, what it's like growing up with a black South African mother, which I found highly comical at times, but you could just see the love within his family, and I think that was what gave the book so much heart. And then the last chapter, essay, story that he told was explosive in every sense of the word. You definitely didn't put the book down at that point. But yeah, I would definitely recommend. Such an engaging read. I absolutely flew through it, and we read that for our work book club and everybody loved it. So yes, you need to get yourself a copy of that book if you haven't read it already. And in at number 1 is Blessings by Chukwuebuka Ibeh. Ibeh is a debut author, and this book is about a young boy, Obifuna, who is growing up in Nigeria, and he discovers at a young age that potentially he is gay, and his father discovers this and ships him off to boarding school. And we get this book from 2 perspectives, from Obifuna's perspective, but also from his mother's perspective. Obifuna was very much a wanted child. They tried for a long time to have him, and so he was very much a blessing to them, and I think that's where the title of the story comes from. But blessings take many forms, right? And I just thought the way that Ibeh created his protagonist was amazing. He had so much depth to him. He wasn't a perfect person by any means, because nobody is a perfect person, but you're rooting for this guy like throughout the book, and for his mother, who is going through her own struggles, and your heart hurts for both of them really, because they have this incredibly strong bond when he is a child, and sort of the politics of the country that they are in means that they are forced apart to a degree. And yeah, I really loved this book, and I really think more people should read it because it blew me away, and I cannot wait to see what Ibeh does next. And so that was the 11 books and 1 DNF that I read in June, and I will be coming to you tomorrow with July, but if you missed yesterday's, which was all the books I read in May, I will leave that here for you, and I will see you very soon with another one. Bye guys!